Kate, fantastic. Delighted to chat again. And specifically today, talk a little bit around strategy for someone who is on their way becoming a creator, or rather active as a creator, and things that they can improve upon rather in kind of Q4 this year and onwards into Q1 next year. So firstly, thanks a mil for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Fantastic. So I guess there's no doubt about it. There has been some volatility in the market over the last while, off the back of kind of a bit of a sense of stagnation, even though figures were arguably quite healthy. So I suppose not a huge amount to talk about really over maybe the last even 3 months. So in your case, and you're doing stellar work pushing out content. How do you kind of prioritize, or I suppose ideate in terms of like managing growth in a bad crypto market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I think it's a question that a lot of people just generally have a hard time kind of contextualizing, right? Because a lot of times people are like, "Oh, well, I have content. If I should make content, I just make the same thing and it'll get views or it won't." And I think like that's not always the case, particularly in something like crypto, where, and I would say maybe even this could apply to more of like the traditional stock market too, where it's like there are different things that kind of come into vogue, right? So what is popular today may not be popular tomorrow. The whole market may not be popular tomorrow. The whole market may be popular tomorrow, right? And so I think how that impacts people and just general sentiment surrounding the market does, particularly, especially in crypto, have a pretty extreme impact on that, right? And so I think as it goes and how, like, for example, over the past several months, where the crypto market maybe has been okay, or and even in the more recent term, it's actually just been downright bad. You have to know how to exactly change what you're talking about to make sure that you're still posting and providing relevant content to the crypto market. For example, meme coins may have been very, very popular, but I mean, there's basically zero talk about meme coins right now in the like specific crypto market, right? So if you are continuing to make kind of daily and constant meme coin content, you're probably not going to be seeing much, if any, growth at all, just because that's not the phase of the market that we're in. And so, of course, this isn't saying jump around to anything and everything that's hot, but you need to make sure that you tailor your content to what's actively relevant to people right now.
Yeah, really good advice. And if I could ask him, to give kind of insight to someone who's watching and learning, like, do you find, is it a mix of keeping an eye on what's happening macro wise in the market, at the same time looking at other creators and maybe what's working for them and trying to mesh together? Or do you have a kind of a lab as such, or a way to build that strategy for yourself?
Yeah, no, another really good question. I think it can be a little bit of all of it. There's a couple of things that I like to do specifically. I mean, the first and most important thing is try to understand who your viewer is, right? If you don't really know who your viewer is, well, maybe that's the first task, is figure out kind of who your ideal viewer is, and then just make sure that you're producing things that are interesting for them, right? So for example, if we want to stick back on the meme coin example, while meme coin content may not actually do particularly well, if your ideal viewer is a meme coin viewer, maybe you can be talking about what is going on in the market specifically right now that could impact various meme coins. Maybe go from more of like a macro perspective, um, you know explain and kind of set the stage as to in what types of environments meme coins do well, what type of environment are we right now, how do we get from here to there, like a lot of that type of stuff.
Yeah, really good advice. And I think, I suppose also within that, you're probably constantly seeking feedback from your audience. You're checking every comment. You're really trying to garner that kind of feedback so that you can install it into what you're doing. So yeah, super kind of sage guidance in terms of when there's a kind of a down market and someone might have a cadence of producing, like, let's say, a video or two videos a day. Have you any guidance? And maybe it's already baked into what you've advised, but like any guidance on someone who's kind of just purely struggling with like what volume of what to discuss, and they feel their video minute count starting to reduce. Is there anything that springs to mind around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I personally don't worry too much about like my video minute counts reducing. I think the biggest thing is like it's important to make sure that you're always providing really valuable content in an efficient manner, right?
Yeah.
So don't kind of dance around the subject or ramble on just because you're trying to hit 10
Yeah.
minutes because you think that your audience expects a 10-minute video. If you normally are producing a 10-minute video packed full of content, but today you only have 6 minutes worth of packed content to provide, then that
Yeah.
would be my personal preference is, just go for the value first and the value-based videos, and then, kind of let the rest take care of itself. So that's
Yeah.
personally what I look for.
No, super guidance. Like, just really stick to value, as you said. I think that's fantastic. Great stuff. So I guess based on, as you said, being efficient and straight to the point, another big question that's springing to mind for me is like, in this period, or I guess in general, what do you find are the trickiest challenges for someone who's in between like the kind of 10,000 to 50,000 subscriber mark?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think at every point you have kind of different opportunities and different challenges as well, right? So for people, like sub 10,000, you're probably going to be in that range where you are really kind of just a general unknown in the crypto space. Even at kind of the lower end of the 10 to 50,000, I think you could probably kind of make that claim as well. But prior to that, kind of sub 10,000, it's I would say it's relatively easy to grow in any market just because there is a core base of viewers that is always watching. And so you can kind of find your way into those various communities and, certain types of things like that. But as you start to get into the 10 to 50K range, you kind of have a different set of benefits, but also a different set of challenges. The benefits, of course, being you are starting to develop an audience that just likes you, and they will
Yeah.
basically watch whatever you post because they like you, they like your take on the market. And that is something that is, of course, super valuable, and you're not really going to have, let's call it sub 10,000. Of course, the lines are not bright here. It kind of blurs as you go. But within the 10 to 50K range, the benefits of that are, of course, immense. But there is kind of the challenge that of you are a little bit more known in the space, right? Many of the communities that you've tried to break into, you may have captured a lot of the most die-hard consistent viewers, and so they are consistent viewers on the channel. And so now you're trying to face like, well, how do I continue to grow when some of
Yeah.
these initial strategies, might have been working initially, but now like, maybe I've captured a lot of the initial like really strong community there. So maybe you have to look at breaking out into other communities. Maybe you need to break it into more of like the macro analysis or specific like comparison videos, various types of things to help kind of establish your own brand. But that's kind of the next pivot that you have to go on, which is like, I have a strong, consistent audience. Where do I kind of continue to grow this without being too fragmented, I guess, in my approach?
No, super interesting, and again, like fantastic inspo for someone who's in that space. When you kind of describe very well about like kind of breaking into new communities, any guidance around kind of finding those communities for someone, or do you feel like it harks back to kind of the original piece of advice, is just piecing together different pieces or different, I suppose, interweaving different parts of the market and then trying to find your own way? Or do you sometimes think, is there something to be said for very acutely targeting a community that has activity, that has interest? I know, for example, a lot of guys are obviously over the last while been very heavily targeting XRP because it's getting tons of views and there's a lot of kind of eyeballs. But any kind of counsel for someone who's thinking about, how do I crack my next community?
Yeah, that one's a difficult question with a lot of nuance in it for sure. But I think the biggest thing to understand there is, first off, you have to be at least some level of genuinely interested in the product. Now that might seem obvious, right? But I do think there are a lot of people who try to go and maybe tackle something for the views and for the interest surrounding it. But if you're not genuinely passionate and genuinely interested about what you're talking about, it's pretty obvious in the videos, right? And so it's super important that you understand kind of what you are interested in, what you want to talk about, and then make sure that that just kind of aligns with your overall channel and brand. Again, being authentic is, there's kind of no replacement for that. that is like an absolute must. And so
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the biggest thing, is just make sure that it aligns with kind of what you're interested in. And then from there, I think a lot of it, you can get down into some more of like the analytics and metrics of, what communities perform well, maybe what influencers or what other KOLs in the space are maybe growing relatively quickly. What are they having success with? Could you maybe copy some of that content? Of course, not directly, because that's a problem, but take inspiration and things like that from other creators doing interesting things in the space, and see if you can kind of put your own spin on it. Maybe you have a way to iterate on it and make it even better or different, or unique in some way that's individual to you. But ultimately, I think kind of more than anything else is similar type of thing, right? Like, even if you are taking inspiration, you need to make sure that it's you, it's authentic. Because again,
Yeah.
I think people can immediately, even if subconsciously, they see the authenticity and they see kind of just if you're actually into it or not.
Totally, totally. It's such an important thing to keep top of mind when there's I suppose the temptation at times to nearly go into the presenter mode and just kind of be, just for the sake of getting content out there, to be a little bit contrived and artificial, versus, as you're saying, just stay authentic, always stick with what is really you, and don't worry too much. Obviously, don't be blind to what's going on in the wider market within each subsection of the communities, but don't be too kind of analytical to a point where it comes across as plastic. So I think that's a fantastic bit of guidance. I guess then moving towards kind of our final question on the agenda for today is, I suppose, what do you see yourself? You're someone who's done like immensely well over the last 12 months. You're busy juggling life and travel and businesses and all sorts of exciting things. But even within, let's say, the crypto market, like, what do you see as the biggest opportunities as a content creator right now moving towards 2026?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity as a crypto content creator, at least the way I see it currently, I think this is going to be a massive opportunity for new entrants, and potentially a massive risk for existing ones, right? And I think a lot of that is going to be the world moving towards a lot of this, yeah, I guess, like institutionalization, regulation, a lot of this type of stuff. It seems pretty clear that kind of the things are in the works, where there's really no going back from it right now. It's going to happen. And so just making sure that you're caught up on the leading edge of what is going on there, I think is going to be super, super important. Of course, there could potentially be some legal ramifications in terms of how we talk about crypto specifically. That would be, of course, helpful to know. And then, even things just like, how does this change the industry now that we're, it's being legitimized to a certain extent, right? Does more money pour in? Does that provide various opportunities for, kind of new markets that are up and coming, making sure you're staying on the leading edge of what's actually going on there? Do we have maybe some, below the radar types of cryptos that are actually catching some institutional adoption, or maybe coming out of institutional roots, things like Sui? I mean, they were a Facebook, or I guess like a Meta team before they got kind of laid off post 2021 crash. Like, how does that all impact things, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that are changing massively rapidly in the crypto space. And so I think a lot of that, as it relates to institutions particularly. And so I do think that a lot of that is probably going to really have a major impact on just the landscape of crypto, and making sure that you have content to speak to that and to kind of talk to that directly, I think will be a really strong opportunity.
Yeah, immensely well articulated, Kate. I have to compliment you on that. It's so accurate. What you've said is like, this world that we're in is no longer, well, definitely hasn't been for quite a while, but it's certainly not left field or kind of obscure or, a little bit unique. It's now mainstream finance, and that's the way that it's moving. And I think, as you said, that provides a massive opportunity, and also potentially a bit of a pitfall for maybe guys who are in very much a routine of being very much like coin or token focused or price focused. Like, there's so much more going on now in the kind of the wider market with the adoption and the institutionalization. As you said, I mean, every every couple of hours you open the news, there's something else at a governmental level or like a major international banking level that's occurring. So I think the fast adoption of your grandmother talking to you about crypto is probably rapidly en route, and probably preparing for that is an opportunity, as you said, and maybe a challenge for some. So yeah, super advice overall, Kate. Really excited to have another chat on kind of strategy in a couple of weeks, but really grateful for your time, and pumped to chat again really soon.
Yeah, of course. Super happy to do it. And thanks for having me, Garvin.